Welcome to Ego Over Id, the psychology of everything, where we explore the science of what makes us human and the stories that make us feel it. I'm Dr. Austin Attaway, an organizational psychologist, professor, and mental health advocate. Each episode will explore the psychology behind our everyday lives and the complexities of our experiences. Whether you're here to understand yourself, others, or the world around you just a little better, you're in the right place. This is where research meets real life. So grab your coffee, take a breath, and let's dive in. Today, we have a special guest who's been a real leader in the world of positive psychology and the science of well being. Dr. Kennon Sheldon is a distinguished professor of psychology at the University of Missouri, and his research has changed the way that we understand happiness, motivation, and the very essence of self. Dr. Sheldon's been a pivotal figure in the field, exploring these really big questions like, is it possible to become happier and stay happy? And how can we align our goals with our true selves? He's co developed the hedonic adaptation prevention model, which contributed significantly to the self determination theory, one of my personal favorite theories. And he has written extensively on what it means to live a truly fulfilling life. His latest book, Freely Determined, delves into how understanding our own agency can transform our lives. So let's dive in and explore this journey of becoming ourselves with Dr. Kennon Sheldon. And to really kick it off, I want to better understand from your point of view, Kennon, how does one go from being in a rock band to being a retired, distinguished professor of psychology?
Um, well, our band really wasn't that serious, and we never even played out. But, we were serious in that we were writing original music, and I still think it was pretty darn good. But I'm kind of introverted, and I really didn't have the, temperament to be out there on stage and, dominating attention. I don't really like being the center of attention, so turned out that being a professor was a more self-concordant activity for
Oh,
me. I mean, I still play music informally in an amateur sense, but being a professor has been a good gig for me. I really have enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a good time so far myself, and do you feel we'll get into this a little bit more later, but do you feel like that decision to go from rock band to professor, was, fully agentic? You had free will in that?
Absolutely. I knew the
Yeah,
music wasn't gonna work, and I knew I was gonna end up back in grad school sometime,
yeah.
and so I managed to. I mean, it's even harder now to get into a good PhD program is quite difficult, but I managed to get into one. I managed to stumble into a good advisor, and then it took 6 years to get a good tenure track position, so it's kind of a long road, but, I kept at it because I a lot of intrinsic motivation. I was just very interested in the questions, and as long as I could keep getting some kind of paycheck, I would keep going, and eventually it all worked out.
Sounds cool. Have there been any primary questions that you feel have kind of guided your career?
Yeah. One is, what is happiness and how can we pursue it, successfully? And that's been an important question because in the early days of positive psychology, there was this big issue of whether you can increase your happiness and stay increased or not. There was this perspective that happiness is genetically determined. You have a set point, you can't really leave it, you can bounce up and down, but you're always going to come back where you started. And so that was a question that Sonia Lyubomirsky and I addressed early on. We think we demonstrated that there's considerable potential to increase your happiness, but it's not very easy to do. um, and this is where the agency thing comes in. You have to you have to find things to do that bring in a lot of positive experiences. Um, it's kind of like pumping up a balloon. Um, the balloon is going to have a certain steady state, but if you keep blowing the air into it, then it can stay inflated. Um, and we see pursuing, finding the sort of right goals for you and then uh, engaging in the process of pursuing them is a way to keep that balloon inflated.
Okay. And so do you in freely determined, you could talk a little bit about this, and free will. So you this idea of free will and how we can kind of keep the balloon inflated by um, utilizing our free will to engage in these experiences. What is the real case that you make for that? And I know that's kind of the primary argument of your book.
Yeah. Well, the book isn't really so much about proving free will is true because that's never going to be done to everybody's satisfaction. Um, but what I did was I started with the compatibilist philosophy definition of free will, which is very simple. It's the ability to think about multiple things that you might do next, generate options, pick one, and then get going. And that's what free will is according to compatibilist philosophy, which is the most popular perspective on the issue in philosophy. Um, so in the book, I then switched focus. Let's just say free will is true, and ultimately we're responsible for everything that we do, even though there's many challenges that we might have to deal with. Then the question becomes, how do we use it wisely? So we all have it, but we're not good at using it. And so the challenge becomes learning to use it effectively so that you find yourself doing things. Actually, you have chosen to put yourself doing things that are really meaningful and engaging for you.
So is there like one core piece of advice that you could give to people on how to tap into that and use their free will?
Yeah. We have a model called the goal breakthrough model. It's like you're stuck and you're not very happy. How can you break through to something better? And that model says it starts by first recognizing your dissatisfaction. You don't like what's happening. And that can be difficult to do even at the beginning because once you admit that to yourself, then you're saying, I have a problem. What's wrong with me? But you have to admit that you're dissatisfied first. And then even more important than that, because lots of us go around feeling dissatisfied. But once you're feeling it, the really important thing to do is start asking yourself questions. Why do I feel this way? What do I really want? Who am I? You have to pose questions to your own mind. So it's like the conscious, so it's ego in a way.
Right.
Um, the conscious part of us, which we could call the ego, has to ask the non-conscious part of us questions. And the non-conscious part is it's sometimes called System One, default mode network. It's we don't have direct access to it. It's intuition, but we do have the ability to prime the pump of our own intuition by having the courage to ask ourselves unsettling new questions or difficult questions that we don't know the answer to. And so this is a creative process theory. There's venerable theory that creators get new aha moments when they first prepare and then they can't answer the question. They feel stuck and then they give up. And then there's incubation where work continues beneath the surface. Then at some moment, a new idea pops up into awareness. And at that point, you need to grab it and use it to make a new decision about what you're going to do. And so, just to kind of circle around, notice your dissatisfaction, ask yourself questions about it, then give yourself time, your non-conscious mind, some time to work on it, and then be open to what your non-conscious mind shows you when it does, and it will because it's sort of a slave to consciousness. Even though consciousness doesn't know anything everything, or doesn't have access to everything, it's, an internal executive that can spur the machinery.
And so I think there's a part in there that um, I've personally struggled with, and I think a lot of listeners would resonate with, and that's how uncomfortable it can be to pose some of those introspective questions. Do you have any advice for kind of working through that discomfort, or even that, that discomfort means that you might be on the right track?
Yeah. I'm not sure that there's any single way to do it. You just have to recognize that this is where you have to go if you really want to have life that you want, you know? And we've written lately about existential courage, which is the desire to know the truth about yourself, even if it's uncomfortable. And so, how do you get to that moment? It's going to differ for every person. But if you don't get to that moment, you're you're not going to be able to move forward. You're going to stay stuck. So at some point, hopefully, you're ready to begin getting unstuck.
Yeah, I like that idea of existential courage. It's my first time hearing of that, but really, having it's kind of like, passing that threshold of being like, okay, I'm done being in this state. I'm done um, feeling unhappy or dissatisfied. I'm ready to change and ask myself these tough questions.
Exactly.
Do you mind if we talk a little bit about self determination theory and self concordant goals? Um, yeah, I've been a big fan of self determination theory as an organizational psychologist, and even in my teaching, I put in my teaching philosophy in my syllabus, and I talk about self determination theory and my goals for the students in that, so that they can even become aware of it. Um, do you mind just quickly kind of describing or explaining self determination theory in plain language?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really complicated theory, but
It is,
I,
yeah,
I
but
think,
those three pillars, and yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, Basically, the theory started with the recognition that when you pay somebody to do something, they might not like to do it anymore. And that's called so they start off with intrinsic motivation. Here's this fun puzzle to try to solve. In the condition where they're paid $1 for every right answer, um, compared to the condition where it's just, hey, check this out. In the paid condition, after they finish, the task, then the experimenter walks away, says, here's some magazines you can look at or do whatever you need to do. I got to go get some questionnaires. And then the participant is observed in a one-way mirror, and the amount of time they spend playing that puzzle is recorded. And so the finding is that the people who were paid to do it, they don't want to do it anymore. They're done with that. They read the magazines instead. And so this has huge implications for how do we motivate people. And a worker, does offering them a big raise going to be the right way to get them really motivated and creative, or offering them a new challenge? So the idea is that money and approval and rewards are distractions from what really needs to be happening. And a lot of times, so then SDT is about intrinsic motivation, what makes it go away, what maintains it, and that concept has been elaborated in a lot of different directions over the decades.
And so for self-determination, we talked about, this idea of money, not, being that extrinsic motivator, not getting people to that point of happiness in their jobs. Are there specific things that people can do to be more self-determinant? Whether if they're just normal workers or if, we
Yeah,
have some entrepreneurs listening?
yeah. Well, sometimes if it's not working, you just need to recognize that dissatisfaction, ask yourself questions, and then make a change. And sometimes people think, well, I can't make a change. I have to feed my family. Um, I would say that sometimes, it's worth some hardship to really make a big change, but it's understandable that you might not be ready to do that. So then you can just try to sort of transform your experience. It's like, okay, doing this for money. Where am I? Why did I got training in this field. What? Because I loved it. Let me try to find ways or change, my job task, or talk to my supervisor, find ways to make it, more engagement, more expression of passion. And that's much easier said than done. But it is the fact that we have some ability to um, interrogate and alter our experience as these symbolic selves wobbling up here in our heads way above all the machinery down below, cut off from a lot of our minds. Still, that's why the self evolved. And maybe that's a different topic, but
Right.
I'll let you
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of listeners would be shocked to this idea, just as, many of my students are when I teach it in my business classes, that money isn't going to be the primary motivator, because I think it is the first thing most people think about when they get into a new job. Um, and so, we have a big hustler culture. And do you feel like this hustler culture in the United States or in the West that's kind of evolved, um, has become a bit of a red flag, a bit toxic, and has diminished some of our ability to seek out happiness?
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, I
that's
know,
the
it's a
short
big
answer.
question. It's a big question. I know, it's a big
Um,
yes. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things we study is materialism and where it comes from, and how it's often a compensation for unmet psychological needs. Um, so, you don't feel like you're doing what you want, and you feel kind of pushed around, but at least you're making a bunch of money. Um, and it's just not a very good compensation. It doesn't work very well or for very long. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and we hear so frequently how, um, you know, whether it's true or not, but I think a regular thing that we hear is that a lot of the millionaires and billionaires, they have so much money, but they keep trying to find that happiness, and are keep trying new things to seek that out. And some of them do seem relatively dissatisfied.
yeah, it's kind of an addiction, in a way.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Um, a small pivot to self-concordant goals. So we have SDT, self-determination theory. What are self-concordant goals?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, as I was saying before, I learned as a grad student how to assess people's goals. And that's typically tell us 15 things you're striving for, and then people write things down,
Big or
and
small?
big or small. But striving is kind of a biggish concept. So it's things you're trying to do over time in your life and so forth. And what we found was that, well, actually, let me back up. When I went to Rochester to work with DC and Ryan, and I learned self determination theory, I realized that they had this way of assessing something that a person is doing to find out if it feels self determined or not. I thought, hey, I'm going to apply that to these goal statements that people are giving me. Because what if, even though we say they can write down whatever they want, what if they're writing down things they don't want? And we found that that's very often the case. That okay, here's my strivings. Okay, why are you doing them? Oh, I have to. I'd feel guilty if I didn't. I'm doing it for the money. Not not at all for the enjoyment. No intrinsic motivation. That seems like a kind of a bad condition to be in. My the thinking that I went through at that point was that okay, it's one thing to assess how self-determined people feel in school or on the job, and that's what the theory had been doing. It's another thing to assess how self-determined they feel in the goals that they themselves have set for themselves. And there's this weird condition if you're not doing what you want to be doing. And it implies, well, you need to find the thing you really do want to be doing. If you can find that courage that we've been talking about. And so self concordance theory says that, again, we're these cells, these verbal selves up in our heads, kind of cut off from some deeper parts of us. Um, and so we don't know what we want. And that's a developmental challenge to figure out what we want. And then that brings us back to the goal breakthrough model, which is really a
Asking ourselves
way
those
to
questions.
become more self concordant.
And so we're talking about individuals who are going day to day, relatively dissatisfied, going to the job for the money, maybe going to school because their families have that expectation of them, but it's not exactly something they want to do. Um,
Exactly.
and that dissatisfaction growing and not in alignment with this deeper level of goals that they might not even be aware of yet.
That's right. And a lot of times to figure out what that is, it helps to notice what you actually like to spend your time doing. And that can bring you to the realization, what I really love is this. I love painting or dancing or something that might not pay very much money
You're right.
that you might not want to let yourself know about because then you might, you'll think you'll be unhappy because you'll be broke. But the ironic thing is that's almost never the case. If you're okay, I have a good way to
You could, yeah,
illustrate this. We studied a sample of 6,000 lawyers, and we found that the amount of money they made uh, only correlated with their happiness about point 0.12. There's a very
wow.
small effect
So
size.
for the listeners, a point 0.12 correlation is tiny, tiny, tiny. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's very typical in the happiness literature. That income is way less uh, correlated with happiness than people think. And so in these lawyers, what was much more correlated with their happiness, like correlations in the 40s and 50s, was how self-determined they felt in their job, which just means, do I enjoy it? Do I believe in what we're doing? Is it challenging, interesting? Do I learn things? Is our mission one that I'm behind? And in my book, Freely Determined, chapter 10, there's a long story about a high-paid lawyer who was miserable and got to the point of contemplating suicide until she started to finally ask herself questions. I'm a success. I'm making all this money. Why am I so unhappy? That's the question part. And then she, on a random moment on a work day, the image of an old friend popped into her mind that she had back in college. They had both been environmentally active. Uh, Led by the friend. It was the friend's, push, but and so that was a cue from the lawyer's non-conscious, and, eventually she looked that person up. They were uh, running an environmental, mitigation firm. Finally, she reached out. They needed a lawyer, who "Oh, but it was gonna be a 50% pay cut." "No problem, because I realized this is what I actually wanna do." And again, money does not correlate very highly with happiness, nowhere near as much as people think. Most important thing is to find something you like.
yeah.
You enjoy it and you believe in it.
And, something I think in alignment with that, that I do regularly tell uh, my students is, if you go into something that you're passionate about, more often than not, you're also gonna be good at it and be able to make a living.
That's right. You'll find a way. Like I said, it took me 6 years post PhD to finally get a good job. But they let me hang around in Rochester, because they thought I had some potential and I was publishing. And so, you'll find a way. If you want to be a musician, keep at it. You'll get there, or you'll get the information you need to finally realize, well, that's not it, and now this looks better. Right? So you just have to keep finding the thing you most want. That's it.
We've touched on this, really a misalignment of internal goals or those deeper goals, with the goals that people are pursuing. Um, and we've talked about these questions that we can ask ourselves. How can people tell initially if there is a misalignment in their goals?
Well, the easiest way is ask yourself why you're doing it. And there's four questions that self-determination theory uses it. And you can rate on a 1 to 5 scale, not at all to very much. How much do I enjoy this? That's one. That's intrinsic motivation. How much is this meaningful and important to me, whether or not I enjoy it? Sometimes you do important things that aren't fun, but it's still, meaningful and important. So those are the two autonomous reasons. And then the other two questions are, um, to what extent are you doing this to avoid feeling bad or guilty? Uh, not so good if the answer is 4 or 5 on that one. And to what extent are you doing it mainly for the money or to get approval, something like that? So, if you answer those 4 questions and the 3rd and the 4th question scores are higher than the 1st and the 2nd question scores, that tells you all you need to know. You need to find something you like better.
Right, and that's a nice quick temperature check too. Yeah, thank you for sharing those. Do you think that there's an opportunity if there's any people listening that are trying to figure out their next their thesis or dissertation, do you think there's an opportunity to explore the misalignment of goals or self-concordant goals with imposter syndrome and seeing if that misalignment maybe does exacerbate or
Yeah. It
stimulate?
might be, it might be a temperature check, like you said, in addition to the ones I already talked about. So I would expect there to be a pretty strong correlation between, feeling like an imposter and feeling like, you're controlled and not self-determined in doing whatever it is. So, it's another piece of information that could feed into the picture.
Do you have and we might be going in circles here just a tiny bit, um, but do you have, like, a kind of singular reason why people might be choosing things that don't make them happy?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of reasons. One is we might not have, matured enough in a developmental sense to have realized and recognized what we really like to do, and the only cure for that is to keep experimenting and exploring. And one problem today is that in colleges, you don't get encouraged to do that. Um, took so many different classes in college. I thought about majoring in religion, anthropology, philosophy, or even experimental physics. And I took courses in all those areas before I settled on psychology. So, it takes exploration to have the maturity to make these choices. And you don't know yourself. You don't know what you like. Another issue is that we're surrounded by cultural messages and other people who are influencing us to, "Well, you should do this, you should do that." But they don't really know that. They're just trying to give some suggestions or the idea we have to make as much money as possible, you have to be a partner in the law firm. Culturally imposed standards can also keep us from finding and doing what we really want.
Do you mind just touching a little bit on what you mean by those culturally imposed standards? Or is that what you're referencing with
It's just, like materialism, or the idea that, success is exactly corresponds to your income,
right?
or the
Or
status
those fa
symbols
or
that
those
that
family
you
expectations to be a doctor.
family expectations is another one. Yeah.
Um, so you worked on this model, which we're gonna do our best to break down for our listeners because it's a mouthful. But the hedonic adaptation prevention, um,
Yeah. HAP model, get it?
HAP model, HAP. What in the simplest terms? I guess let's just start with one piece of that hedonic hedonism. Could you just really briefly just hit on
Yeah.
hedonism?
Yeah, so this isn't about hedonism, which is we think of as, "Oh, a hedonist, he's laying back on a couch and somebody's dropping grapes into his mouth,"
Right.
right? That's not what we're talking about. Um, hedonic just means, has to do with feeling, and and hedonic adaptation means that you get used to a feeling so that you don't notice it anymore. And so if you hedonically adapt to a positive feeling, then it won't be positive anymore. You'll take it for granted. You met your loved one, you have this great relationship, you get married, and then she or he or they are there every day, and you stop doing the things that made you fall in love with them in the first place. You take them for granted. You adapt to them. They become just this thing in your environment.
You've moved out of that honeymoon phase.
That's right. That's right. So this does happen, and it's actually a good thing in many cases because we can adapt to pain. We stop noticing it. We get used to it. But and so it's good that we do that, but it's not good that we adapt to pleasure, because then we have this drive for more and more. We all want more money. Okay, I'm adapted to being a hundred millionaire. I need to be a billionaire. That sort of thing. Um, so, in order to prevent hedonic adaptation, what we showed in our research was that you have to keep that steady stream of novel, positive experiences coming in, right? So the novel experiences are new by definition, and so you haven't adapted
And
to them yet.
big or small, I mean, are we talking about going to amusement parks, playing
It could be
games,
either. It
going
could
on a
be
walk?
either.
Okay.
Um, if you're a runner, um, don't just run the same route every day. Mix it up, or try different kinds of books maybe than you have read in the past. Or
If you're a foodie, try a new restaurant,
yeah,
just
yeah. So to beat hedonic adaptation, you got to do new stuff, and ideally, it'll be stuff that works. That really does intrigue and engage you. And so, as long as you can keep, it's like blowing up that balloon that we talked about. As long as you can keep not just air in the balloon, but novel air, fresh air. That's it,
right,
fresh air in the balloon.
fresh air. Each breath is a new novel experience into that balloon.
I
Yeah,
mean, that's not realistic, but there is something to it that we get stuck in ruts. Um, and so, one thing to keep in mind is just mix it up.
yeah. You know, being one of the foremost scholars on this, I mean, do you find yourself getting into ruts yourself?
I do. Um, yeah, I get bored easily, and actually,
Same.
yeah, my whole career was, and you could, in one sense, coping with boredom. I needed to keep thinking of the next research topic to get into. Um, and that kept those novel, fresh experiences coming in because each project was, oh, no, there's all these questions here. I bet I know something about that. Let me try this study or set of studies, and then it's writing it up after the results are in. So I think you could say that I'm a pretty decent example. Not that I'm so amazing or anything, but I needed to deal with my boredom, so I kept mixing things up with my research. I mean, if you feel bored, that is a form of dissatisfaction. And it should lead you to ask new questions like, what do I want to do instead? Or how do I deal with this? And then the answers will come. You just have to ask yourself for them.
Yeah, and not getting frustrated when you don't have an answer immediately too.
Take some patience because there's that incubation phase while you're waiting for your non-conscious mind to produce some new stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, being comfortable in the discomfort almost. So in your book, and a little bit, in some of our earlier questions, you talk about the importance of this idea of appreciation and then also variety. How do these things kind of help together, this idea of appreciation?
Um, appreciation is actually isn't something I've studied that much, except in the guise of gratitude, um, which isn't quite the same. Or would you think of it as similar?
I guess that's where I was coming from, was this idea of gratitude. Yeah,
Yeah, gratitude does a lot of good things for you, especially if you express it to another person. Creates connection, communion between you and the other person. It also lets you have a sense of humbleness, not just take things for granted. It's like, isn't this great that I have this wonderful wife? Instead of just, oh, why isn't she nicer to me? So, making a habit out of consciously appreciating things is one of these ways of getting the fresh, new experiences. I haven't tried interacting with my wife this way, exactly, or not that you would scheme it that way, but it's all about using your conscious mind to get yourself experiences that uplift and help develop you.
Yeah, and that's really I think that really, harkens back to this idea of the self and not being on autopilot, right? Using your autonomy and your agency to engage differently in the moment. um, and really using it to practice gratitude. Because I think, in my experiences with gratitude, it's very rare that we kind of automatically go into that space. It does take a little bit of a conscious effort to step into
Does.
gratitude.
'Cause we're more prone to look for what don't like
Yeah.
sometimes than what we do.
Yeah, we're a pessimistic species for sure. How do you see people applying kind of uh, the bulk of what we've been talking about here, either in their relationships, careers, or even in their own mental health journeys?
Yeah. Well, I think you'd what the thing to keep in mind is really pretty simple. Uh, does doing this make me happy?
Yeah.
Um, and you might not want to admit that it doesn't. Again, because that puts you in this uncomfortable place of uncertainty. Um, but it's a very reliable signal. Uh, there's a research program on emotions as information. Emotions are the deep you giving the conscious you important information. And so you got to pay attention to it and not just suppress it or push it aside or say, maybe later I'll deal with that. You should deal with it now if you can, because it's like you've got a bad knee and you need a knee replacement. Oh, I'll put it off for a couple of years, but that's 2 years of suffering. Just go ahead and deal with it now. My brother-in-law just had to make that decision, and the doctors want him to wait. Um, but everybody he's talked to who's actually done it said, "I waited too long."
Mm.
Don't wait.
And it's sort of an investment in time too for yourself, long term, because that's the one thing that we only have a finite amount of. So the
That's right.
sooner you tap into it, the better.
The better. That's right.
Um, we haven't talked too much about environments, but how can we as scholars, leaders, heads of families, create environments that support this idea of, self-determination or autonomy. Um,
Well, that's
yeah, another big question. I love big questions here. So,
so let's say by environment, you mean that there's somebody in your life who is controlling. And that's SDT talks a lot about that self-determination theory that um, as humans, we find ourselves in unequal power balance relationships. I'm a student, you're a teacher, worker, boss, coach, athlete. And so that the problem with those is that the person in the high power situation is tempted to wield their power and try to control you to get you to do what they want. And so if you feel controlled by your boss or by your wife or whatever, um, that's a recognition of dissatisfaction. And so everything we've said before applies. Can you quit the job, or move to a different department, or have a conversation with that boss or coach that maybe transforms things, helps them understand, how they're uh, causing you problems. And so, there's a lot of things you can do, but again, you just have to keep, kind of trying things until something works.
right. Yeah. That makes sense, and shaking up that environment, if you're not able to have those conversations, right? Removing yourself from the situation or the context.
Yeah,
Uh,
maybe there should be a divorce if it comes to that, or maybe you should um, go to that other person that right now they feel like a better fit for who you are and where you're going, but you don't want to be very wrong about that, if you can
right,
help
yeah,
it.
yeah, you need to make sure you ask yourself the important questions about it. Yeah. Um, do you think that there's a common myth about happiness, that you wish people would kind of drop or let go of?
Well, maybe the one about happiness comes from money. You know, we talked about that very small correlation. Um, or the idea that you can't be happy without enough money, and that word "enough" is a loaded, I mean, there's people who are blindingly happy around the world who are living on almost nothing, because they're doing what really matters. So, it's not about the money, it's about the experience.
Yeah,
I mean,
and having that alignment. Yeah.
yeah. Yep, yep. And it's also an educational process to learn what experiences, are best for you, what your talents are, your potentials, and you gotta get started on that. They
Yeah,
don't
you
let
gotta
us do it
experiment.
they don't let us do that in college anymore, so maybe we have to do it after we get out.
Yeah, yeah, or in your free time, right? If
Free
you
time.
really, design your free time to maximize, sort of, breadth or variety of experiences, then, you know what you don't like at that point.
Yeah. You're using your free will to make choices that help you learn how to better use your free will.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So in this kind of last section here, if you could go back and give your younger self, young Ken, pre college, a piece of advice, what would it be?
Funny. I think you would hate this answer, but
No, that's okay.
keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
just
and you know what I don't hate it. You know what I love about that answer is that you really landed somewhere that resonates with you.
it works for me, and I was not any prize in some
Yeah,
ways, but I found something I could be good at that I really like to do, and I give myself props and credit for having, with the support of, a wonderful life partner, and she was there all the way. We were broke for decades, seemed like, but I kept going. So, I don't really know that I mean, I'm probably gonna think about this after we finish the conversation. What would I tell myself?
yeah.
But overall, I'm pretty happy with how things work.
Well, what that tells me is that you're happy where you're at.
Well, I'm as happy as
Yeah,
I can
right.
within my genetic set point. We can and
Yeah,
that's actually fun to talk about for a minute. We haven't hit
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Um,
Please do.
so we mentioned before that there's some genetic determination to happiness. Some people as infants already, they're, kind of grumpy, colicky, whatever. And other infants are happy and cheerful and giggling. And that kind of persists throughout the life. Um, and so the way we talk about it, Sonia and I, is that everybody has a sort of default place that they tend to go. And for some people, that's higher. For some people, that's lower. Um, but you have some latitude around. So here's the default, but then there's a range. It's not a set point, it's a range from here to here. And you can get yourself into the top part of your range if
Mm,
you do these things that we've been talking about, the fresh new experiences. And so I'm not a bubbly, happy person by any standard, but I keep myself in the top part of my potential range. Yeah, instead of being Mr. Exuberant, I'm Mr. Reasonably satisfied.
I like that. S- Circling back to some of our questions here, is there something in psychology or human nature in general that Dr. Sheldon does not understand that you can't get off your mind, or that you keep circling back to that kind of keeps itching at your
Yeah.
brain?
Yeah. Well, you'll probably wanna cut this out, but,
That's okay.
some of the things people do in politics are pretty mystifying, and,
Mm,
um, how did we end up in the situation we're in now? Um, which some people love the situation, so this is why you might.
we can talk about
Yeah. There seems to be something in human nature that in the face of insecurity or stress wants to find, an authoritarian to solve the problem for them. Um, and so, that's an answer to the question, but it's usually not a good answer. Um, but the people who are looking for that seem to be kind of gullible. Let's say they believe what they hear, they don't question it. So, as a political being, I wonder, how did that evolve? And I can actually see how it maybe did. If times are really tough, you want somebody who can keep things kinda in order or gives that promise at least.
Yeah. And so, I find that really interesting. How do you feel that contrasts with this idea of self-determination then?
Yeah. Um, I th I mean, I think education has a lot to do with it, um, and the habit of being open to experiences and, questioning your experiences, being skeptical about what you're being told, um, that a lot of people don't seem to really have that habit. They'll believe what they're told because they like it. Um, but as scientists, we're trained it doesn't matter what you like. You wanna find out the truth, and so that's puzzling that people would, ignore the truth or even completely subvert it or, uh, because of this insecurity, I think is what it's ultimately about.
Right, that self-serving bias, the leaning into misinformation because it makes you feel good, because you
Yeah,
like it.
yep, yep.
Yeah, yeah. This space, we're talking about this idea of education and, being introspective, asking questions, being skeptical. How do people know, and this is a little tangential. How can people know if where they're getting their information from, or the education, or what they should be skeptical of? Because I see people, kind of across the spectrum, not being skeptical enough from everywhere. And you and I, as scientists, we're probably skeptical of everything that comes through,
Yeah,
left,
yeah, yeah.
right, center, up, down, right? Yeah,
Yeah, well, it's part of that question asking thing that I've been talking about. Not only question what you want and what's wrong, but also question what you're being told. And I think the question that is missing in a lot of cases is, what is the motivation behind this message? Why what are they trying to get me to do? Um, and I think if you just looked at that, you would be able to see how self-serving it. They want clicks. They
yeah.
want donations,
There's always a
you know?
goal.
Yeah. So just getting a habit of thinking about why am I being shown this message? What do they want from me? Instead of saying, "Oh yeah, I like that."
Information always has a goal attached to it. Um,
Communication usually does,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Cool. Um, in a kind of quick wrap up, I mean, we've talked about a lot. I know you're working on a science fiction book now, um, and we've talked a bit about freely determined, which we'll touch on in just a second. But if you weren't a psychologist, and you weren't retired, what do you think you'd be doing now?
Well, it would depend on whether I had, enough money to get by on. But if I did, I might go back to music.
Nice.
I was in a couple of your bands during, the last 15 years or so. That was a lot of fun. I've gotten, more self-confidence to be able to get out and perform. It's kind of fun writing music, so that's something.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you probably have a little bit more time now that you're retired. So the second your album drops on Spotify, shoot it our way.
Yeah, will
Yeah.
do.
Um, where can people find your book, Freely Determined?
It's on Amazon, their book,
Perfect. Freely
selection.
Determined, Dr. Ken Sheldon. Do we want to give a shout out to a nonprofit for first time listeners? Ego Over Id is a nonprofit. We're a 501(c)(3), and we like to highlight other nonprofits in the United States that are doing great work. There's mental health clinics, social services. Ken, is there any nonprofits that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I like what, Places for People in St. Louis has been doing. I'm a little bit familiar, with them, and, they're a nonprofit, and they help a lot of people out, so I'd be happy to help them in my name.
Awesome. Yeah. For those of you listening, please go to our Instagram. We'll be highlighting people for places. later this week or whenever you're listening to this. And if you're in the Missouri area, St. Louis area, please check them out and consider donating to them as well. Um, anyway, I want
That'd be
to
great.
thank. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Ken. I want to thank you, Dr. Sheldon, and I also want to take a moment to consciously express some gratitude for your time and all of your insights on agency, authenticity, self-determination theory, what it means to kind of engage with yourself and be conscious, asking yourself these critical questions, trying to align your deeper goals with what you're actually moving towards and achieving. It's been great talking to you.
Please do consider giving us a like, a follow, and maybe even 5 stars. Find us over on Instagram, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Ego Over Id, the psychology of everything.